Shiki is an anime, a great one. I don't know about you, but vampires seem like an overdone thing. In 2010. Nowadays you'd think that making a show about vampires should be something where you'd seen everything done before, but it's about how it's done. Creators and consumers now don't necessarily realize that it doesn't matter how much you take. It matters how much you interpret it and transform it. So here's the rundown. Shiki, again, is about vampires. They suck blood and they turn their victims into vampires. A family moves into the small town of Sodaba, and people start turning up dead. The cast of Shiki is one that focuses on a large number of people and how the epidemic affects the town. Little like Pathologic if it followed a doctor, a man dying of the plague, and a priest all at the same time. It focuses a lot on the medical part of how they turn into vampires and how it affects humanity as a whole in the village. If anything medical, it focuses a lot on the morality of treatment, and how the conflict of the vampires versus the humans develops. Before we get into the actual show though, let's frame the time period. The 2000s was an era of anime that had so many uniquely positioned adaptations and great, unique shows coming out every year that you have to question what made it such an inspired era. Shiki is one of those shows from the 2010s that people do talk about, but it's in this weird limbo where it's seen as an underrated classic, but not, good enough to be talked about like other things. The 2010s had its fair share of classics, although you don't see anyone talk about it in that way, since everyone has this collective delusion that the 2010s was actually more like 3 years ago instead of starting 16 years ago today.
SpongeBob, I see him!
It's probably the fact that people won't shut the f*** up about their childhood being so much better than what exists now instead of trying to examine what made that time period so full of innovation. It's more than valid to be nostalgic for the 2000s era of animation, however. Shiki was such an unfortunately positioned show, considering it came out at a time to be overshadowed by previous releases in the same year, like Tatami Galaxy, Angel Beats, K-On!, High School of the Dead, Penny and Stocking, and now you're gonna call me crazy, but also Kiss X Sis, Yosuga no Sora, and Oremo. The concept of Shiki inherently just doesn't look as appealing as incest, rock bands, boobs, and time travel. You cannot convince me that those incest shows didn't have a larger cultural impact of irony weebs going and saying that we were a flaming garbage fire 5 years later more than Shiki ever did in adapting a cool story about vampires. It's just the way the world works. The 2000s really were an insane time for uniquely directed animation. I could talk cliche with things I've spoken about before on this channel, like with Paranoia Agent, or just in general what people bring up in terms of unique styles, but unique art direction and atmosphere can carry a show in more ways than one. I don't think Shiki is an outlier to this. Shaft has the longest track record of trying out insane shit with their adaptations. However, I'm not going to be the guy who just says the Monogatari series is where their experimentation started. In fact, I have another example from an adaptation they did in the latter half of the 2000s for this occasion. Let us go back to the olden times of 2007 for this one. EF, A Tale of Memories, is an adaptation of the visual novel EF, A Fairy Tale of the Two. It's a good example of showing how you can portray an idea creatively, even if it's very simple. In episode 10, they have a scene where one of the couples in the story has a conflict where they're going to be leaving town over feeling like their circumstances don't allow them to have a good life, and they never had love from anyone in their life. They turn a phone call into a kind of artsy-fartsy harrowing depiction of a one-sided rant towards a lover. It's a little cheesy, but it's an outlier that takes something simple and turns it into a very neat build using music and an urgent timer depicting what would be the payphone time running out. I think about it often when considering how you can portray certain ideas in animation. The reason I bring it up is that elements of this type of art direction are seen pretty strongly within Shiki. Taking a scene that seems simple on the surface but making it abstract is always an interesting prospect within animation. How is it visualized? How does the character or characters' thought process contribute to this? How does the music and sound enhance this? There are quite a few examples throughout the show showing how well it excels at creating an atmosphere. There's a scene early on in the show that some will point to as one of the most chilling and best examples in all of horror anime of being stalked. You may have already seen it before, but it's the scene in Shiki where Megumi and Tatsumi sneak into Toru's house to make Natsuno watch as they start the process of killing Toru. It's first portrayed as Natsuno's nightmare, showing them climb up the stairs as he watches the house get segmented and how it would look in a 3D plane without anything but the layout of the house. The sound is wriggling, crawling, with an organ and building towards to a climax. Nothing comes. It wasn't real. His mental state is put at ease. Until it isn't. They were there the whole time, and Natsuno still feels like it was a dream, showing everything in this hazy cover like he's still not out of the nightmare. It's done insanely well, and almost one-to-one with the manga, simultaneously serving as an example of an adaptation done even better with the sound design. Another example of the mesh between visual and sound is the Fantasia-like dream sequence of Megumi remembering the experience of meeting the Kirishikis at their manor. The weird electronic music and breathy gasps just makes the whole thing so interesting as an experience altogether. It's urgent and frantic as she succumbs to blood loss. A scene that similarly shows this atmosphere is one that I don't really see people praise very often. The scene of the junior monk Seishin Muroi's nightmare, where he feels the fallout of him and the village doctor Toshio Ozaki's relationship. The wall that has been built between them makes him feel so distant from his moral compass after the good doctor's invitation to help him wipe out the Shiki. The blood creates prison bars, showing how much he feels Ozaki will never come back from the decision he made, showing that there's no returning from what he had done. I really love how the show handles these visuals when it comes to moral dilemmas, even if it's for a character you come to hate in the end. Another one we can't really discuss right now. Don't worry, he'll get his time. I don't know if I would call it music technically, but the sound design has some really interesting things, like the weird rapping and tribal sounding build that happens in certain scenes throughout the show. It's one of my favorite examples of creating a jarring atmosphere within the horror genre. The OC as a whole is pretty good, knowing exactly what is necessary within a scene. I do think, though, that it gets a little bit cliche at times where they use that same piano track in most sad scenes, but it's forgivable. Since my nature dictates that I change my music on the channel every time I upload and also put a super duper big musical sequence in, I don't know if you'll catch me using outside of this video. Speaking of... Nah, I'm just kidding, not yet. You gotta wait till the 30-minute mark or so. Character design is another big factor in how unique the show and manga are. Most people's first impression when they see the cast is probably one of a few things. Why do they have no gravity on their hair? They really have evil eyes like that? These designs are so exaggerated, and so on. I think that these knee-jerk reactions are good, though. The fact that people need to try and engage with why these things were done in the first place meant that it accomplished that goal of creating interesting designs. Take Megumi Shimizu, for example. A girl who's kind of a bitch at first, dresses like she's a city girl with pink hair. Now, even if each character didn't have wildly colored hair, it's believable she just dye her hair despite the villagers who think she's too much for the place. Her eclecticism and trendy goth clothing helps sell her stupidity in a way. She acts high and mighty, and nothing really stops this, but like every character in the show, as we'll soon find out, there are things lying underneath. We can go ugly too with Masao Murasako. His character is as ugly as his soul, as he looks stupid and acts even worse. But anyway, he has a design that already looks like they're building you up to hate him in the first place. His actions match this as he gets into a fight with his literal 5-year-old brother and breaks his shit over having some inferiority complex. He crashes a funeral to just talk about himself more than the deceased. I could go on, but he's a real bad apple. Not like that bad apple. If you like this so far, I would recommend you to hit the subscribe button, comment, and like the video. There's honestly a lot to talk about here. Shiki's plot completely revolves around conflict between the villagers and the vampires. That's obvious, like completely so. So, like I was speaking before, it's probably easier to talk about the rest of what needs to be said if we talk about the story at the same time. We're going to save the best characters for later, so let's talk broadly. Shiki has an ensemble cast, meaning it focuses on a lot of people over a long period of time. You might think that makes it hard to make some deaths mean something within the story, and you're partially correct, but instead of trying to make you feel for the character in particular, at least for some, they focus on the big picture. The story takes place over the course of about 3 or 4 months, and it all lies within one town. The tragedy of Sotoba. And this creates a division between the two halves of the series, of which there's a psychological horror mystery part, and the other part which is blood and guts ultra thriller. It's not a point where the show gets worse, in fact the show arguably gets better the further it goes, it's just something that happens in horror, where the more you perfectly understand what's going on, the less terrifying it gets. Shiki's After understands this perfectly. When you focus on the horror, you need to have some balance of knowing that you want to scare your audience with the unknown in some way. You can't really create good horror without a sense that you don't know what's going on fully. It's why a lot of horror anime fail, because they focus on solely scaring the audience rather than making a genuinely great experience. Shiki wants the audience to know that a shift has happened around the 5th or 6th episode. It's not necessarily where the show shifts from being a horror anime, but where it starts to reveal its hand to the audience as a whole. It kills a lot of people in the process of doing this, and it's not done in a way that's ridiculous, like how shows like Another do it. Regardless, it doesn't use death or cheap shock early on, it uses death to show urgency to the characters within the show, and death doesn't really faze the mountainous town of Sotoba at all. It's like it goes in one ear and out the other. The village has been slowly dying from the inside out the whole time. I've done this music bit twice, don't worry, we'll get to it eventually. All the same, the mountain village has mysteriously not suffered depopulation in recent years. The population neither grows, nor does it decline. Certainly there have been families moving bit by bit from the more remote part of the village, but that number is offset by the growth at the southern part of town. The mountain village always has a heavy population of seniors, but as the elderly set off in the mountainside forests, the young return from thin air. A bridge between this shore and the other, it is surrounded on 3 sides by that other shore, by death that isolates this shore in solemnity, away from the common world. There, people labor for death and pray for the dead. Really, that was what the village was for ever since it was born. The statements Shiki wants to make are about the carelessness of the people within the village. They only care when the young die, but only so far as it is tragic for them to not be able to stick to tradition within the town's guidelines. The junior monk Seishin wrote that passage about the town, and this essay was published for the world to see. The vampire Sunako Kirishiki took note of the fact that the decay of this village was perfect, as nobody, not even the people who live in the town, would take note of a slow and horrifying decline of people. Tradition dictates the lives of the people in the town to the point of shaping their identities. Those who go against the grain, and those who go with it for fear of not going along to get along. Plenty of the main cast within Sotoba are caught in their own idea of what they were meant to do in life. The junior monk Seishin is suicidal and being forced to take care of the duties his elderly father had, who has now become a cripple in his later years after a stroke. Natsuno Yuuki is forced to move into the declining village, as his family believed it was better for them than the city. Unfortunately, they're in a Stephen King novel, so they will be dead or in an orgy. Megumi Shimizu, as previously stated, is a country girl who wants to make it to the city. Her untimely death as the first victim to the Kirishikis in the anime and manga is the center point of the story. Everyone has their roles in this town, and more than anybody else, the good doctor, Toshio Ozaki, is jaded from having to take over the role from his late father. The town itself is no longer growing or dying when the Kirishikis move into the Kanamasa mansion. In the novel, they address the fact that the old in the town don't actually want it to grow. They stifle growth and never particularly want it to be anything but what it was to them. Sounds a lot like the type of world we live in now, but this is on a smaller scale, of course. The people in the town love to blame anything on the scapegoats of their city in order to never have to confront the sins they're shown. The novel has them focus a lot more on the encroachment of outsiders, while the young people of the town want some outside influence to at least show them some kind of hope for their future. The anime and manga show this a little too, but they don't actually focus entirely on this aspect as well as the novel tries to show. The best example for the show is the character of Motoko, who across all adaptations is a neurotic mother who fears that outsiders are coming to run over her children. Which actually does happen in the novel, so she's not unjustified. But in the anime, she's essentially driven to her base instincts in the second special, showing that her tendencies were almost entirely justified as everyone around her crumbles and rots. It's terrifying and just another example of how Shiki portrays the tragedy of the small mountainous village. And the fact remains that there's a constant reminder for the people in Shiki that they will never escape. The event almost feels like it was inevitable at some point. When the show goes from the slow death and methodical killing of villagers to the swift destruction of the village, it really kicks it into high gear. The Shiki are almost forced by nature to attack humans, as they are essentially created to make more of their kind, like anything that lives, moves, breathes, or really does anything in this world. Sunako Kirishiki is the main villain of the entire show, and she almost gets to the point of being sympathetic, but at a point you realize how many people this little girl has killed, and the fact that she wants to create a colony that will only end in suffering, and you know she's just a little unjustified. Like the people in the village, they are forced into their roles, and they come back as immortal beings with all of their features prior to death. It's almost unbelievably evil that the Shiki would target children in that sense. Although the Shiki are brought into this world as a byproduct of another species' feeding habits, the humans are also not wrong for wiping out an entire race that is doomed to fail from the fact that once humans are all gone, the world would be over. The Shiki have no plan to solve this. In the manga, it's said by the enforcer Tatsumi Kirishiki that he never cared fully for Sunako's plan. He was a nihilist. He sees Sunako as a symbol of death and destruction. Most of the Kirishikis are like this. Seishiro in the anime says his father was a hunter of humans, most likely a serial killer, while in the manga he just wanted a place to belong. Kind of a conflicting story path for him, but we'll go with the anime's backstory for him, considering it fits better with the idea that he's a collaborator and only really wants to see humanity die out as well. The ones that don't really make this easy are Yoshie, the other enforcer for the Shiki, and Chizuru. When I say enforcer, the Shiki have two kinds of existence when they come back to life as well. They have the regular ones, given the name of Shiki, and the rarest type, Jinro, or werewolves. As stated for the reason, it's just because vampires are usually shown with werewolves, nothing special in the meaning. Both were taken in by Sunako and made to believe that they had a place within the Shiki, and were not mistakes, or an affront to God. It's almost cult-like, the indoctrination that these creatures do within their own kind. As soon as they wake up, they're instantly forced to be within their clique, and when given the chance to kill, almost all of these people were at the right time, right person, right place for their life. Within the town of Sotoba, everyone is just trying to survive given the circumstances. The people at the center of everything are the people with the most to lose, and everyone else is at the wayside. I think it does a good job of humanizing most of the people who get turned, and even the main family to an extent. The specials especially create another schism, as the one where they explore the pipeline and kill all the Shiki trying to escape might even be one of the greatest episodes in all of anime, focusing on the character of Nao, whose family was all murdered by her in a vain attempt to get them to all cross over to the other side, as she just didn't want to be alone in the end, is really heart-wrenching. None of the people in the town really deserved this in the end, but tradition ultimately dictated that this town would be targeted over anything else. How brutal it gets within those final episodes is something to behold as well, considering it essentially turns into the mosquito torture video for vampires. And I think this is where I can bring up the fact again that I consider the show to be split into two parts, horror and thriller. And we can probably start focusing more on one of the single greatest characters in all of fiction, the good doctor, Toshio Ozaki. And I think I'll restate what a lot of people have already said in the past by saying Shiki is a show that shows how people become monsters given the circumstances. Because it's true. It may become a little crazy, but it never gets to the point where I consider it to be ridiculous, because lynch mobs in of themselves are already a ridiculous concept. So trying to dumb down the aspect of unsanctioned cruelty is almost doing a disservice to your story. I think the level of violence to correct the wrongs of what they would see as demons invading their town is crucial to the overall concept, which is why the Doctor works so well as a man who will stop at nothing to save his town. He's the exact person who wouldn't flinch at murder and puts too much of himself to save others, to the point of essentially coming to a stalemate with the monsters. Killing his wife in order to prove to the town that the Shiki exists and they're coming for them is unbelievable. His work ethic is incredible. He's even more cruel in the manga, as he just fundamentally hates that he would trample on life as they do. Whereas he's not present in the Pipeline Massacre in the show, he personally executes the attack in the manga. He's a man possessed by the rage of seeing his life's work destroyed in a matter of months, as well as him saying he couldn't come up with any reason as to why he even married in the first place. The fact that roles and tradition decide what the small population of Sotoba believes in is what drives him to wipe out the Shiki in a way. He'll fight to save them with all his life if it comes to it. His friend, the junior monk Seishin Muroi, is very similar. His morality lies within who he's been all his life, a kind of inactive participant, a guy in the back of the party. He has strong beliefs but doesn't act on them until he's ultimately forced to choose. He writes a tale named Shiki to frame his discontent with life. He's frail and doesn't really have any strength in any part of his life. He's forced into the role of taking after his father, like Toshio, and knows that he's at the end of his rope. Sunako senses his distraught nature and sees right through him. He ultimately has some kind of cold-hearted nature to him, that he can't even really understand humans as a whole. Even though Toshio was his friend, and he would have stuck behind him, he can't bring himself to choose him over the town. After meeting Sunako, he essentially abandons his life to see the destruction of Sotoba, as he never really felt as if he had any reason to exist in the first place. Even as a human, he seemingly has no regard for human life, considering how little he cares for saving the village in the first place. He never even makes a decision during the chaos of Sotoba's decline. He only tries to find out what happened. But as soon as everyone else can suck up their morals, he has nothing to provide anymore. He makes it out to repeat the cycle again. But with everything in his character, it begs the question, is it actually repeating the cycle if he's able to abandon the will of everyone in the village and move past it? He refuses the notions to defend his honor because he never actually assumed it in the first place. In the novel, people make rumors about his identity and not being married at 32. It is ultimately a choice on his part to try and keep away from the limelight. Can it be said that he has anything outside of an individualistic sense of justice if the only people he consistently sides behind are those which benefit him in the end? We haven't gone over the third character that serves as another main role in the story besides the duo of Seishin and Toshio. Well, I've brought him up before. His name is Natsuno Yuuki. Each version of his character, novel, anime, and manga has a different role for him. The anime and manga have him serve as a disruptor, another person caught up in the mystery that plagues the town. The novel unfortunately has him die before he turns into a Jinro in the other adaptations. He's not interested in fighting for the honor of the village. He's not interested in saving the village. He's interested in eliminating the ones that took him away from this mortal coil into their immortal cult. He's a little shonen protagonist-y, mix of a tsundere exterior, in that he does things that make him look like a hero, while not really outwardly saying that he wants to save anybody or make a choice. There's a sense of justice to him that Seishin doesn't necessarily have. He's akin to a martyr, which is probably why in Seishin's novel it's animated to show the main character looking similar to Natsuno. He blows himself up to prove how little he values the life of a Shiki in comparison to humans.
君は死ぬのは怖くないのかい? 俺はもうとっくに死んでる。
Even though he himself wanted to leave the town, he didn't want this life. He went out on his own terms. Where the Shiki have the enforcers, Tatsumi and Yoshie, all the humans need is one person. Tomio Ookawa. He's the real embodiment of everything the town stands for. Tradition, blood, justice, God, and the rage for people lost along the way. An inability to let go, a sense of justice that even the good doctor can't feel. He'd stake his son 100 times before he let the Shiki ever come back again. The Shiki want a place to belong, and to get to that end, they'll kill to get their way. Tatsumi serves as the muscle and a man who won't act on his own unless he's given an order by the one he was saved by. But in the end, his motives are tied to the fact that he's only interested in seeing what Sunako's end goal is. He's not driven by a sense of justice or moral obligation. Yoshie in the manga is driven by her desire to belong to a group, like the Shiki, and is ultimately duped into believing that Sunako's goal will be accomplished. Their motivations are not in any particular realm of judgment like how Tomio's are. It's like he's the perfect defender of everything that made the village what it was to this point. He's old and traditional, and that's where his biblical justice comes from. He can execute because of the fact that he knows what he believes in. His internal motivations are to keep what he's known for his life, and the Shiki are the ultimate evil for Sotoba and his and the town's final destination. Sunako is ultimately evil by what she does to accomplish her goal, but her goal is not evil in of itself. Her day-to-day goal is to survive. Her ultimate goal is to have purpose and belonging, a place where they can be free. It's acting on the fact that she never got to experience being a real human. She was lured in by a vampire and turned before she could even experience life overall. The rules that she's lived all her life are not the same as normal people. Death is not the end. But they aren't so dissimilar in the way that people want to stick with their own kind, and to that end, she didn't want to be alone. It's hard to attribute blame to any party within the story of Shiki. The horror within the story of Shiki and how the villains act is that of a party that specifically wants to simply justify their own existence. They have no goal outside of creating an environment where they can simply be accepted by reality. There's a very strong sense that the story wants to tell one not only about morality, but about the honor and justice involved within tradition and pride. I think Tomio and Toshio can be considered to be the embodiment of the town's need to stick to these consistent methods. While both of them are from different eras, they have the same goal: to not be abandoned, to not be destroyed. But in this way, they have opened up the town to destruction. Honor, morals, and tradition are fine concepts that serve as a strong guiding light, but the overemphasization of these aspects is toxic and erodes the core of their principles. There's a big difference between how the enforcers think versus how the human defenders think. Tatsumi and Yoshie, they don't have big reasons behind their ideas. Yoshie is barely given an idea of what she actually represents and wants to accomplish within the anime. I think that the manga giving her an actual motivation is cool, but the trade-off is that we don't get to see her head blown off.
人狼が通るの
Tatsumi's motivation is laughable as well, just that he believes in Sunako and will follow her to the ends of the earth. It is less principled than the humans and shows that for all the Shiki are, they don't have a concept of where to go or what to do. It's an infant civilization trying to conquer one that's been around for at least a century. Seishin has his own principles, but he ultimately abandoned the idea of the town existing in the future, because he has no faith in his own existence to go on, and once he's free of the shackles that the town fixed to him, he was able to go on and create a life on the run. You can debate how much that life is worth living, but would you say that his life was even worth living before? People in the town treated him like his story was over, and he treated himself the same. Arguably the only happy ending in the story is that Seishin was able to be free, even if you may not like him. We should be looking to the future, to revise these traditions and make them fit our modern day. I'm not saying we should get rid of religion or get rid of marriage or get rid of long-honored traditions, but that these things shackle us to the earth in the way they exist now. Gender rules, the ideas behind age, our modern era's practices, war, peace. It's all nonsense. It exists to make life mean something, to make death and murder reasonable. But murder is always unreasonable. And what destroys the town in the end is those same traditions and rules. To bury their dead, to mourn those still living, treating them as the walking dead already, to bury their young with the idea that this village is where you need to work to keep their life, to take away freedom for those who would have had a choice. The Shiki come to take the town up on that level, and make it last forever. While the Shiki were just trying to live, the ones that helped save the town were the closest to the Shiki in agony. The Doctor and Natsuno each had to take up someone else's role in order to survive, but in different ways. Nobody really wins in the end. Seishin and Sunako live to try again, to live again somewhere else. Life will never be the same. The townspeople have to come back and rebuild from the embers after everything is said and done. The old and the young will never be able to separate from each other. The Shiki are the tool by which time takes away from the young. The knife that the concept of rules and tradition use to take away from the living. The cycle will never end. And that is the tragedy of the town of Sotoba. The knowledge that there will be more just like it.
It's hard to adjust your eyes after the matinee. From the room of the theater to the light of day.
There are numerous ways to take Shiki, and I don't think there's any wrong way to interpret it. It has so much to discover and understand about it, but if you don't want to take it as such, you can just love it for what it is. It's an incredibly interesting psychological horror thriller. Subscribe, comment, and like for more. Thanks for translating the novel Cinespiel, if you ever see this. Goodbye, everybody.